Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McKusick, and we have a short for you today, and one that is good for the off season. Could be done during training camp, could be done a lot of times. So we're going to talk about the ideal 48-man roster construction for game day. Of course, you start with a 53-man roster, have to trim that to 48 on game day. Joining me for that discussion is Matt Ruff. Matt, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Ken. Hoping that the O's can get maybe one more good pitcher in here for us to feel good coming into the summer, and really excited to see where the Ravens' new coaching staff is going to go in the future. So looking forward to see what Jesse Minter can do for us.
Yeah, very exciting. So Minter is in the house, and we don't know who the offensive coordinator is. We're recording this at 4:09 on a Friday here, so we're not there yet, but hopefully pretty soon. I think my money right now would be on Cliff Kingsbury. I think to be the offensive coordinator, but I think the Ravens they haven't announced it yet, and it may be that they are still thinking they could get Clint Kubiak away from Seattle.
Wow, that would be a huge get. I think that there's a couple names out there, and working with Lamar it's a one of one opportunity, right? It's not a one of one opportunity presently. It's a one of one opportunity in
Ever.
yeah. Who has ever had Lamar Jackson in this stage of his career where he's 29 years old now? Body might be slightly slower, but still has some of the gifts. But his mind has grown a lot. His positional coaching in the offseason has really improved, and so who can take Lamar, who is getting more cerebral with the game, who still has those gifts, marry it to a scheme where we go back to kicking people's butts again? And I would love to see that happen.
Yeah. Just had a great conversation. Please look back if you didn't listen to it, to the conversation with Femi Ayanbadejo about the Ravens DNA. It's labeled Ravens DNA.
Mhm.
It's I think a fantastic discussion about what the Ravens need to do to make sure that they layer in the good new things on top of some great culture that's already been built for the Ravens. And it's a new coaches. There's a risk that you'll lose some of that stuff. I don't actually think it's going to happen because Minter has a Ravens background, but a great discussion. And boy, was Femi engaging and wonderful to talk to for an hour solid. That was just very it's a handful of guests, you included, Matt, that I really just appreciate talking football with. And I just had a lot of fun with that with Femi. Encourage people to go back and listen to that. So let's talk about the ideal 48, though. And this is your topic, Matt. Why don't you introduce it for us?
All right. So over the past year, maybe over the past few years, the Ravens have done some interesting things with their game day roster, right? So as you all know, it's the 48 game day roster if you activate that eighth offensive lineman. And you have the option to have two practice squad call-ups, which the Ravens have actually used quite frequently, in recent memory. And so as I was thinking about some of the things that have kind of driven me crazy about how they specifically construct that active game day roster, I figured why not get on here with Ken and debate it and see what we think, where we're similar, where we're different, and where maybe some of the things that the Ravens have done as of recent have kind of, driven us crazy. And the reason why I think it's relevant to do it now, as the season has just ended, at least for the Ravens, is because we're going to be getting into draft season. So we get in the draft season and all focus, it's going to be free agency, then draft season, right? And so when you get into free agency, when you get into draft season, it's going to be for the Ravens, it's probably not going to be signing the most expensive free agents on the market, right? Or drafting in the top 10. It's going to be signing players who are going to be good pieces to your roster or maybe even depth pieces, and thinking about how the game day 48 should be structured, I think is really relevant to how you add those pieces. So that's kind of the gist of the topic, Ken, is how do we maximize that game day roster, and really have they done it in the past?
Right. All right. Well, it's a very good introduction here. They certainly have, I think, at times struggled between the balance between offense, defense, and special teams on game day. That was a hallmark of most of the Harbaugh era, and frankly, most of the Ravens era, but definitely most of the Harbaugh era, was that the team always had special teams plus players. Or maybe another way to look at it is limited defensive roles plus very high quality special teams players. It was usually defense, sometimes offense as well. Players who could do both for you, but they didn't. A special teams only role is kind of not enough, and I think it's going to be a theme we see as we go through, where we think the options are to place your 48.
Yeah, and I think in addition to the special teams only conundrum that we'll get into, I think in recent years they've had a lot of players who, in theory, that position on the depth chart could have been a special teamer, but you're not going to play a veteran who's 30 years old on special teams because you brought them in for a very specific role on offense or on defense, right? So, for example, you're not going to say to DeAndre Hopkins,
Exactly.
we need you to play kick coverage, right? That would be asinine. That would be insane. But I think that when EDC is adding these depth pieces, right? I don't think he's going to go out and sign, the number one receiver, but I wouldn't be surprised if he signs a receiver for 4 or 5 million, like he's done with Aguilar, with Hopkins, with Odell. Well, Odell was 4 million times 4, right? But there's plenty of players out there like that. And what I want to make sure that we talk about, what I'd like EDC really to consider is, how do we make sure that we're not having too many of the only role players or too many of the special teams only players? So what we're going to do is we're going to go through by position grouping and discuss each position grouping. And I think it makes the most sense to start with the offense. And I think starting with the offense maybe is the least controversial in this area. And then we'll end with the defense. And I think the defense is where you can see a lot of variation. And again, that's going to be driven by in-season injuries, whether minor or major. But I think it gets more interesting on the defensive front. So let's start with quarterback, Ken. From a quarterback perspective, it doesn't really make sense to do anything other than have 2 active quarterbacks with a non-48 man person, but has to be on the 53 as that emergency game day backup. You don't have to have that emergency third quarterback on the 53. And in fact, I think we've seen the Ravens go without it for large portions of time over the last few years. But you can't go into a game with less than 2 quarterbacks, and going into a game with more than 2 quarterbacks, unless you have a quarterback who maybe does some gadget work for you, might be hard to fit in.
So, first of all, absolutely true on all counts. So there's not a lot I have to add to that other than to say that you can't have a practice squad call up be your third QB. So you can't, you are allowed to elevate someone, but it's one of their 3 elevations. So you can't do that forever. So you either have to have 3 on your roster and then you have a third on game day all the time, or you have 2 on your roster and you don't, which means somebody else needs to know how to run plays. Like Willie Snead was supposed to be able to, back a few years ago when they had the big Lamar Jackson bathroom game. But yeah, there's really no choice at quarterback in terms of a 2+1 emergency.
Yeah. And when it comes to the 53, which again, we're not focusing on, I don't know if it would be a bad idea for the Ravens to maybe get a younger quarterback that they could roll into it. And, maybe you get Huntley as that second quarterback. Seemed like he really fit in well. But nonetheless, that's more of a discussion for another time. So quarterback, we both agree 2 on the active 48 for game day makes the most sense. Let's move into offensive line. So offensive line makes the most sense to have 8, I believe. Ken, would you agree with that?
It's virtually fixed by rule that you must carry exactly 8. And the Ravens actually, due to a large number of walking wounded, once in recent years carried 9 on game day, but it was just a matter of they didn't have anybody else to activate.
Yeah. Now I think that how you split that 8 from a tackle and interior perspective, I think a lot of that depends on who you've drafted, who you have on the roster, who is a quote unquote guard swing tackle, right? But I think maybe in an ideal world, you're probably looking at 4 guys who can play tackle, 4 guys who are inside players, knowing that probably, maybe one of those tackles could swing inside at least. And one of the 4 interior players, if absolutely needed, may be able to swing to the outside. But if you have 4 tackles and you're going to a 5th person, you're going to be in hot water anyway for that game. And you're just going to have to get through it.
Right. I mean, obviously, any situation where you have a couple injuries, even on the offensive line, where you have 8 and you in theory would have enough to deal with it, if you don't have the specialists at the position, you have a problem. The only thing that I think is an obstacle, and this is one thing that the Ravens have in their favor in terms of the draft and whatnot this year, is I don't think you can have 4 pure tackles on your team. The Ravens right now have 3 with Ronnie Stanley, Carson Vincent, and Roger Rosengarten. I don't think they can, the roster, the 53-man roster will support a 4th pure tackle. And on game day, really 3 pure tackles, 1 swing man, and 4 interior offensive linemen is ideal.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I would agree, Ken. I think there was a game a couple of years ago. I think it was the first game of the year where Buffalo went to Miami. Now Buffalo's practicing in even over the summer, fairly cool, northern New York type climate. They go down to Miami, and I have never seen so many players go down, whether it was true injury or just cramping. They were struggling to field enough offensive linemen. I thought that was super interesting. But again, more than 8 is fairly hard. Like you said, sometimes you can squeak up to 9. But you do have a lot of special teams requirements from kick and punt coverage, and you need. I guess you really have 3 body types, right? You have small, medium, and large, and you need a lot of the medium type body types. Think of like a middle linebacker, right? You need a lot of those players to be on special teams, and so you can only have so much depth on the offensive line.
Yeah. So the special teams bigs, as I call them, are drawn from outside linebacker, tight end, and linebacker groups. They're not really drawn from any other group of players. So you're limited in terms of those, and you do need to have 4 of them active per game, so you can have a offensive line for your punt team.
Right. All right. So I think fairly set on quarterback, fairly set on offensive line. When we get into running back, I believe we saw the Ravens have 4 active running backs for maybe a few games this year between Henry, Mitchell, Ali, and Hill. And then obviously towards the end of the year, when Justice Hill went down with the neck injury, that was no longer a problem, and they just ran with the standard 3. I think you need 3. I could see a special teams reason for having 4. If you had someone who was kick coverage or punt coverage, I could see a reason for that. Although, I think sometimes my lean would be for more defensive players, and so if possible, I would probably prefer to stay at the 3 level for that active 48. What do you think, Ken?
Yeah, I think 3 is optimal, but how I laid it out is I think there's 11 skill position players that you can have, and then you can have 1 more somewhere, which is also going to be a skill position player on offense. So you have 1 more spot you can allocate to offense. But you made a good point. You could allocate that to defense and special teams too. You could be a special teams only guy, but I think you need to have 3 running backs, and 1 or 2 minimum are needed for kickoffs. So you need to make sure that whoever you're going to concentrate your carries into, and it's usually 2 backs, neither of those guys is a kickoff return specialist where you're taking some additional risk.
Yeah, for sure. So from a tight end and wide receiver perspective, it's kind of hard to completely separate them, although they, certainly are very different body types, and the different body types are needed on special teams in a variety of different ways. The Ravens have, throughout the course of this year, for almost the entire year, I believe, they ran 4 tight ends. Now that's including Ricard in there. So tight end / fullback.
That's right.
But, they were Andrews, Likely, Kolar, and Ricard. I think that is 1 too many from a tight end perspective. And I think Ricard brings so much value, and I don't want to diminish his value at all. But at some point in time, he either may be snatched up by Harbaugh in New York, or the Ravens just may not want to commit all that much to him. I would love to see the Ravens have an active 3 tight end / fullbacks on game day, with one of the players be like geared towards maybe playing a little bit of fullback when necessary. I think you've seen that take a little bit more of a common thing that we see, where tight ends are kind of playing that. And I think that, look, Ricard's amazing, and it's you can't downplay any of the incredible stuff that Ricard's done over his career here. But I don't like having 4 players tied up into that tight end / fullback position. And I would also like the person who gets time playing in that fullback role to just have a little bit more juice on offense and maybe be able to, even when they're on the field, be able to present a little bit more of a threat than Ricard really does. What are your thoughts there, Ken?
Yeah, so Ricard doesn't have much of a special teams role, so we have to start with that. I think he's on the field goal kick unit, but
Mhm.
not on. And he appeared on the return team during this year, but it's not a regular thing that they do. So your tight end fullback group is one of the places where you could get tighter with it, and the Ravens might next year, depending on personnel, they might reduce their tight end fullback by one. I have a minimum of 3, and I think that's where the Ravens have chosen to have that extra offensive player more often than at other spots.
Yeah, for sure. And when you think of it with the Ravens, as Ken, you've famously said numerous times, actually, this probably goes on the Ken McKusick bingo card. The 4 contracts in the tight end fullback room all coming due at the same time. I don't know if this is the right way of phrasing it. It almost seems un-Raven like to have that happen. Seems like it put him in an odd spot from a contractual perspective and trying to make sure you have some continuity coming back. But I'm kind of hoping the Ravens can maybe do a double dip in the 4th and 5th round at tight end. And I think Lamar's good at using tight ends. Find someone you think is going to work with the offense. I think you need to go cheap. And, frankly, with the 13 million of AAV that they're paying for Andrews, I know that some of the bonus actually got hit the 2025 cap. It doesn't matter. The cap carries over year to year, and cap certainly matters. His 13 million of AAV, it takes up a pretty large chunk. So I would like to see what the new coaching staff can cook up with that 2nd and 3rd tight end, and also maybe some like bit of a hybrid fullback role to see if we can get some really affordable value there.
Yeah, I'm with you. And they can't afford to spend whatever they want on the tight end position. By having Andrews, it almost certainly means that likely will not be back. If someone is really interested in talking about, is there a strategy by use of the franchise tag that likely could be tagged and then traded, for example, or tagged and even kept?
Right.
So will be some interesting things to discuss over the next month or so about these possibilities, because the league year is coming up on us pretty darn quickly. It's only in about 6 weeks that the league year begins. So we're up against it, and some decisions will have to be made. I hope that they're able to get some key signings done, but 3 tight ends, fullback a minimum, and 4 at the maximum, I think is where I would be as a ideal 48.
Yeah, for sure. And Ken, just to add on to what you said there, I won't go too deep into a rabbit hole, although we're known to do that. I was considering the other day, who has more trade value? A franchise tagged Isaiah Likely at roughly 15 million a year, I think, or a franchise tagged Tyler Linderbaum at roughly maybe 25 million a year. Who do you think could return more to the Ravens? Because ultimately what we're looking for, and especially a lot of the people who are listening to your podcast, you're thinking about value. How do you create more value for the team? Because at some point in time, you're hoping that value flourishes and benefits the team in some way. And so I'm wondering, there are so many teams out there with really poor offensive lines, and there are going to be so many teams out there with a lot of salary cap. The salary cap has gone up, is going to continue to go up, and there's a lot of teams who have no talent to pay. And I think that they're going to shell out for players like Likely, players like Linderbaum, and frankly push them way out of our pay range. And I'm wondering who has more value from a trade perspective, right? Or a JJ point perspective.
A legitimate question. Likely has less of a proven track record as a receiver. Not that I don't think he's very talented, I do, but I think that also he doesn't have any Pro Bowls that drive up his franchise tag number unnecessarily. They also they might drive up the franchise tag number. They definitely drive up the 50-year option number. So in those cases, neither one of those is the 50-year option relevant anymore. Linderbaum, they could have given it to, they didn't, and that's why he's a free agent now. Right. And likely was not a first-round draft pick, so he's not eligible for that. And I have to actually go see if I'm just remembering incorrectly about how Pro Bowls or postseason honors impact the franchise tag. So anyway, I'll go. Maybe you can see right now what the franchise tag would be on both those players while we're looking this up. But yeah, I think either one of them potentially could have a little bit of value, but it's not much. It'll be residual value. And it's a big risk for a small gain is my problem. So if they put Linderbaum on the tag, they've got to be ready to keep Linderbaum under that tag, and I don't know that they are. I
Right.
think that it'd be just too much of a bite. Likely, I think they could be. It's a much smaller number, so maybe it's reasonable. Do you have the numbers in front of you?
No, I wasn't able to. Wasn't able. I
Okay.
thought it was 15 for Likely and 25 for Linderbaum, if I recall. But
Right ballpark, certainly.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
I agree, Ken. I think that it would be a ballsy move to franchise Linderbaum, knowing that uh, you don't have the desire to keep him, especially not at the
right.
25, give or take number, right? That would be a ballsy move. Do you think that could return you a low third round pick or a
No,
high fourth round pick?
no, nothing like that. And this is why I say it'd be a salvage value that you get,
Right,
because
right,
if the other GM is savvy and he's like DaCosta, which not all of them are that good, but you're going to hopefully the market's going to be efficient in terms of acquiring Linderbaum, more likely for maybe a 6th round pick in addition. And it's going to look a lot like it's going to look like exactly to people is the Anquan Bolden trade.
mhm,
What? You traded Anquan Bolden for a 6th round pick? Well, no, they got salvage value for Anquan Bolden because they've got to cut him otherwise. And so they did the best they could, and they got a 6th
right,
round pick for him. And that's what either one of these cases would be. The difference of this is that Bolden was under a 1-year, not totally outrageous contract value. I think the Ravens had to pay him about $6 million, which at the time, it would have been a lot in today's dollars, but not 15 or 25 million, not quite.
mhm.
But anyway, the Ravens can't take that risk if the rest of the market calls them and says, all right, you go ahead and keep Linderbaum at 25 million. We'll wait for next year. That just won't work for the Ravens.
Yeah, yeah. All right, back into it. So the last group on the offense is wide receivers. I think that the most logical for a team would be 5 or 6. I think for a team like the Ravens, 5 probably makes more sense. And then, like you said, Ken, you between the 3 running backs, the 3 tight end / fullbacks, and the 5 wide receivers, you may have the ability to put one more person in that grouping. But when it comes to the Ravens, especially the Ravens of the past, don't really know what the Ravens of the future are going to look like, especially without even having an offensive head coach yet. I think having
Hi, folks. The Super Bowl is here, and MyBookie is where you can turn your bets into bankroll. Are you scheduled to go to the Super Bowl party and you don't want to be there? Yeah, I've been to that party too. Managing your portfolio of wagers through the evening can be your ticket through Super Sunday without getting caught up in your brother-in-law's political rhetoric. Whatever your take on the game, MyBookie has both side and prop bets to make your Super Sunday a lot of fun. That's why I use MyBookie. You've probably heard them talked about on Jimmy Kimmel Live for their deep board of prop bets. These bets become some long-lasting memories, including watching Refrigerator Perry score in Super Bowl 20 at 100-1 odds. If there's ever a time to get in, it's right now. One account, one wallet, bet the spread, live bet the second half, hit the casino during commercials. It all lives in one place. Go to mybookie.ag now. Use promo code Ravens and get your first bet covered up to $500. If it doesn't hit, use your bet back bonus token and run it back. Don't just watch the big game, make it pay on MyBookie. Sometimes it can feel like everyone else has it together in their love lives. Whether married, dating, or single, the truth is most of us are still figuring out and finding our way. February is a tough month, whether you're single or married. You may feel pressure with all the talk of flowers, candy, stuffed animals, relationships, and dating. Therapy can help you identify what's dragging on your relationships and find ways to brighten them again. Whether it's for individuals or couples, it's an opportunity to identify what's getting in the way and help remove obstacles to happiness. That's where BetterHelp comes in. BetterHelp has quality therapists who work according to a strict code of conduct and are fully licensed in the United States. BetterHelp does the initial therapist matching work for you so you can focus on your therapy goals. A short questionnaire helps identify your needs and preferences, and their 12 plus years of experience and industry leading match fulfillment rate means they typically get it right on the first try. If you aren't happy with your match, switch to a different therapist at any time. With over 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, having served over 6 million people globally, and it works. With an average rating of 4.9 out of 5 stars for a live session based on over 1.7 million client reviews. Sign up and get 10% off at BetterHelp.com. That's BetterHelp.com. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp.
Let me tell you about the online cannabis company that's changing the game, Mood.com. They created an entirely line of functional gummies, 100% federally legal THC blends discreetly delivered right to your doorstep. And here's the best part. You can get 20% off your first order at mood.com with the promo code RAVENS. Now, I've tried a bunch of their gummies myself. Each one's totally unique. The Sleepy Time gummies knock me out right away. They help me unwind fast, leave me refreshed the next morning. The Epic Euphoria gummies, they're perfect for when your day just isn't going the way you want it to go. What makes Mood special is how they pair the THC with natural herbs and adaptogens. You won't find blends like this at any local shop. They've got gummies designed for focus, relaxation, clarity, even energy, all made from cannabis grown on small, family-owned American farms. No pesticides, no shortcuts, just high-quality weed you can trust. Plus, Mood backs everything with a 100-day satisfaction guarantee. So head on over to mood.com, check out their amazing selection, and don't forget to use the promo code RAVENS at checkout to save 20% off your first order. This episode is sponsored by Kalshi, the largest prediction market in the United States. Kalshi lets you trade on real-world events, peer-to-peer, instead of playing against a sports book. Kalshi is available across the country, including California and Texas, and it's a really fun way to put your predictions to the test. So here's how it works. You buy a yes contract if you think something will happen, or a no contract if you think it won't. So if you've got an opinion this weekend, like will the Seahawks win the big game this year, you can choose yes or no and trade on it. And you're trading with other users similar to buying and selling stocks. You can jump in and out of your position at any time to lock in a profit or cut your losses. Kalshi also offers combo trades where you can connect multiple predictions across different events to increase your potential payout. In short, Kalshi is where you put your money to where your prediction is. So download the Kalshi app and use the promo code SB60. When you deposit $10 and make a trade, you get your $10 back. That's promo code SB60 on Kalshi.
More than 5 wide receivers just doesn't make sense. The usage just isn't high enough at that position. And I get the special teams value, but frankly, instead of having a 6th wide receiver, I would rather have an extra defender anyway. Because I think on special teams, having a defender is a little bit more valuable. Someone who's used to tackling as opposed to someone who's not.
Okay. All right. I'm certainly with you on that. And in terms of the wide receivers, we saw the Ravens at the end of the year kind of alternating weeks for Walker and Wallace. Wallace certainly is a guy they'd never sit down in 2024, but they sat him down a fair number of times in 25. And Walker was playing good special teams and was also a valuable receiver. So it was hard for them to make that choice on the last position. They never sat down Wester, by the way, which it's not shocking or anything, but Wester's role is fairly limited with the Ravens as a punt returner, occasional kickoff returner, and very occasional receiver.
Yeah. And how many punts did he return? I mean, it seemed like there were so few between punts that get fair caught and just the fact that it didn't really seem like there were that many punts this year. I'm making a complete generalization without fact, but it almost seemed like sometimes that was a bit of a wasted roster spot. I did like when they used Wester on kickoff returns occasionally. I thought he was pretty quick and could get upfield. I get the thought that it's more suited for a running back, but I don't know. I kind of like having a smaller, quicker player as an option on kick returns.
So, I mean, LeJohntay Wester only had 16 returns. He had 8 other fair catches. And I don't know how many other times he was back there and the ball sailed over his head, for example. Wait, maybe I could figure that out. Looks like there was 26 snaps, so 2 others he didn't get to the ball. It was either kicked in the end zone or something else happened. That's a very small context for any player. And it's not like it's a completely unimportant role, but it's probably too small for that role to be his only role. So hopefully in his second year, and I really thought this would be the case in his first, that he'd become more of a part of that gadget offense, would take Flowers out of it. And Wester, because of his natural game day activation, wasn't going to be limited to just those 30 or so snaps a year as a punt return.
Yeah, agreed. Looking for a little bit more usage there. So if we stick with the 2 quarterbacks, 8 offensive linemen, 3 running backs, 3 tight ends, 5 wide receivers, that's 21. And then maybe a swing player in there. We'll get to that in just a minute, but let's jump into the defense and see where we end up. So obviously we have 3 specialists, right? We're not going to talk about specialists.
So we're at 24 now, talking through specialists and offense. Yep. And so in theory, we still have 24 spots to assign.
Correct. Yep. All right. So defense, I think this is an area where the Ravens have absolutely driven me crazy. There was a game this year where I think they had 4 defensive tackles and 3 outside linebackers dressed. And one of those outside linebackers was David Ajabo. I thought that was diabolical on all levels. And frankly, I think that because they dressed so few outside linebackers or edge players, sometimes people call them edge players, I thought that they ran Mike Green into the ground. And, he just didn't flourish in the second half. Had flashes. You can see some talents there. He's got a lot to work on. He needs more moves. I think he needs to put on some strength. A little bit of weight would also help. But he was running so many snaps in the first half of the year that there was no chance that, someone who's used to a 11 game season in college was going to be able to run a 17 game season in the pros plus potential playoffs. I just thought that was absolutely foolish usage. And then on the defensive line or truly defensive tackle front, they have alternated between 4 and 5 over the past few years. And I really struggle to see an argument that's valid for less than 5 defensive linemen. You run an injury risk. If you have a player go down, you really run the risk of just getting run over if you don't have enough guys of a certain body type. And
fatigue.
Just general fatigue. And I mean, Ken, in the last game against the Steelers, I didn't see Travis Jones go off the field in that second half. And, I get that Aaron Rodgers, the ball comes out quick. He's very difficult, but man, Travis Jones is 340 pounds. He's built like an oak tree. Having him out there every snap, I just thought that was such mismanagement, and I don't understand why they couldn't and didn't maybe plan for that a bit differently.
Yeah, I mean it was a problem for sure, and part of the issue they had is they didn't really have the other guy they would have had to bring on would have been a nose tackle. So you drop off a cliff in terms of pass rush productivity when it's not Travis Jones that's in the game. But that said, Travis Jones I think played all but 2 snaps in that second half, and so that was completely unacceptable in terms of that. And that. If anything's on the bingo card, it's five interior defensive linemen active on game day for me.
Yeah, that might be the free space in the middle. What's funny is in addition to the 5 defensive linemen, I struggle to see a good argument for less than 5 edge outside linebacker players. I think that there's so many different body types for that position where you can have a player who's up close to 270 pounds. And you can have a player that's, almost Yannick Ngakoue size, who's, 240, 242 pounds. I think that if you have 5 of those edge players dressed, I don't see why they couldn't play special teams, right? I mean, I'm not saying every single one of them, but they're freakishly athletic. Their get off is very high. You're not running down the whole field anymore like you used to. And they're good tacklers. They typically have long arms, which I think helps on special teams. And, with the way it's almost kind of like a zone block on the kickoff return, I just don't think it hurts to have someone like, say, Malik Ham, who's, 6'2.5", 250 pounds. You know what I mean? I mean, Ray Lewis had seasons where he was playing heavier than that, so could you find a way to always have 5 of those players dressed and know that you're going to be using them on a variety of special teams fronts?
I mean, I'd be okay. I think Brent Urban is a guy who is a space denier as a run player. Would he be able to do that as a special teams player as well, maintain a lane and whatnot? I'm not 100% sure, but I wouldn't think the drop off would be so great that you'd be taking a huge risk to have him out there. And I would go for 5th offensive lineman over the extra special teams player. Just be willing to make that concession for it.
Yeah, and if you had a player, and I'm not sitting here and pretending like I'm the number one fan of the Malik Ham fan club, but the Ravens were dressing linebackers at the end of the year. It was Carl Jones, maybe it was Michael Kwenku. I might be mispronouncing the name, but what I don't understand is why wouldn't you have Malik Ham dressed instead of them, right? Like there's a lot of times where you saw, David Ajabo out there getting some run and you're just thinking to yourself, wow, I've seen Malik Ham play in the preseason. I at least thought he could come in as that last outside linebacker, take a few snaps off of Mike Green's plate, right? And prevent us from running into the ground. And I would rather have 5 outside linebackers and 4 inside linebackers as opposed to the contrary, just because I think that the edge players I think that they would fit on special teams almost as well as the inside linebackers.
Right. And you have some versatility usually granted by your outside linebackers being able to kick inside too, that they can take away defensive line snaps if needed, which is valuable whether or not you have 4 or 5 dressed. There's some value to not having them rush the passer as often. So I'm in favor of that.
Yeah, and I would like to see on the practice squad, I would like to see them hunt an extra 3 tech or 2. I mean, I thought it was really fascinating how they switched to the 4 nose tackles. I actually think it was very effective in some games, but man, I thought they would have benefited from just having a replacement level 3 tech come up and play, and again, play on special teams. So
it's a very broad range of outcomes for that 3 tech, and I think if you look back at it and who kind of played a little bit effectively, I mean, was Taven Bryan maybe at that level in the time he was up? I mean, he's certainly active over some other people who could have been like Tupou and others who could have taken his spot in some weeks. I thought he provided a little bit of juice on the pass rush and could be a guy that is a reasonable fallback position. You don't want him for very many snaps, but he's a guy who could help you a little.
Right. And the hope going into next year is that Aeneas Peebles is a little similarly shaped to Taven Bryan. I'd say maybe they're both light. Taven Bryan was 294 pounds. I think Aeneas Peebles was maybe 282. Peebles has got to put on 10 to 15 pounds because if he doesn't have enough weight to at least be a below average run defender, then the Ravens aren't going to dress him, right? And then he's just a waste of a roster spot. So really hoping that Peebles can step up there and show a little bit of explosion. It would be nice to have a little bit of an explosive 3 tech who, is really a pass rusher in nature. But nonetheless. So we said definitely 5 defensive linemen. 4 is probably the minimum for outside linebacker, although I think I would prefer 5. When it comes to inside linebacker, I think this depends on, your special teams usage, but it's definitely a minimum of 4 inside guys and then maybe an additional inside linebacker.
Okay. All right. So we talked about the inside linebackers, the outside linebackers. I'm sorry. You did talk about inside linebackers, right? That it's 4 with a maximum of 5 if you're using an extra special teams big. I'm with you on that as well. So really we're using the 4 as a minimum to set the stage for where else can you use that extra player or players that you have.
Right. And so if you have 5 defensive linemen, 4 edge players, 4 inside linebackers, and then you get to your secondary, right? So secondary, we say safety, cornerback. I think sometimes the lines get a little bit blurred, although a true outside corner is a true outside corner and a true free safety is a true free safety. And then there are some players who really only have the body type to play in the slot. So, there is a variety of body types, even though they're all kind of small, quote unquote, small players. There are a variety of body types that can play there. I think that, you need 4 safeties and 5 corners. And if you do 5 defensive linemen, 4 edge players, 4 inside linebackers, 4 safeties, and 5 corners, that takes you to 22 players, 22 players on the defense. And if we go with the limited version of what we did on offense, that was 21 players plus the 3 specialists. That gives you 2 players left, which is funny because you and I were kind of thinking it the same way. You have 2 players left to really plug and play across your roster.
Yep.
And so where to deploy those 2 players, I think a lot of it just depends on where the talent is on your roster, where you're deficient and where you have the needs. But I really wouldn't mind having an extra edge player. So instead of 4, having that be 5. And then, depending on how many safeties the Ravens want to use, I wouldn't mind another safety either. Right. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of having an extra safety. If you use a lot of 4 safety packages, you don't want to go into a game with 4 because then you'll have forced usage considerations with the first injury. I completely understand forced usage with the second or more injury, but I want to go into every NFL game with no forced usage on the first injury.
Yeah, agreed completely. And I think that the Ravens, so you could say it was, the first forced injury, but I think there were some times where they were a little deficient this year. I remember you and I talking back in the offseason. We thought that they needed one more safety, and we didn't want them to lose the ability that Kyle Hamilton has coming down into the box. And so I think that they missed a little there. Maybe they relied on Sanusi Kane and others, but it's definitely an area where, with the way they use Kyle Hamilton, you need to be careful with how many you dress.
Yeah, very careful for that specific reason and how important he is to the offense. But in terms of the safeties, they've had a lot of inert material in the bloodstream, so to speak, the last couple of years. Eddie Jackson was a guy they brought in, and they knew the choice was between cutting him for good or trying to see if they could work out his problems. Marcus Williams wasn't playing at a high level, so that put him in a bad place. And eventually, they did flush the toilet on those two, and they gave the jobs to Hamilton and Washington, and that worked out. That was a turning point in the season, much like this year, bringing Hamilton down to the box turned the defense around in a lot of ways. But I think if you're going to have a 4 safety alignment where you have a slot corner that might be Ardarius Washington, who we can consider a safety or corner, but I probably consider a safety for our purposes here, Hamilton, and then 2 guys on the back end, I think you need a 5th active on game day to protect that package and your ability to use that.
Yeah, and that 5th safety it's a prime special teams player as well,
yeah.
Right? Especially if you have a safety who's 205 to 212 pounds, right? A little bit bigger than your cornerback that might be high 190s.
Let me say this about that, because safety is where a lot of special teams players come from anyway. In the last few years, they've had Kane and Braid and DeAndre Jackson have at times, all of them have played pretty well on special teams, but it's also a source of inert material, because if that's all they can do and they really don't have a defensive role, which was really the problem with Kane, is that they didn't really trust him to play the back end. It was the problem with Braid. They didn't really trust him to play the back end. And it might end up being the problem with Keandre Jackson, although Keandre Jackson looks like a very special teams player. It should be a priority of the new Ravens brass to make sure that he can be a useful backup safety or potentially a dime back. But if you can do either one of those, that would be enough combined with these outstanding contributions he makes on special teams. Be very much like Anthony Levine.
Yeah, agreed. And I think you can get away with having a special, like you can have maybe one of your defenders be a special teams only player. Maybe you have a returner on offense, but I don't think you can get away with having a handful of special teams only players, because the roster just gets too thin as soon as you have an injury, and you become really susceptible to just one injury really derailing what you're looking to do. And so hopefully they can really piece that together. I also think from a cornerback perspective, while I think roughly 5 dressed on game day is the number that makes the most sense, if you think of the Ravens cornerback room, maybe for their history, but just think about this year, because you can only think about so much. You've had Marlon, who was hurt this year, and Marlon's had injury trouble over the years. Nate Wiggins had the foot injury. He had surgery, according to his Instagram picture of him just getting surgery. You had TJ Tampa that's missed plenty of time, right? You had Keon Martin, who missed time. You have Chidobe Awuzie, who's the poster child for injuries at the cornerback position. Super talented, though, right? But that guy's had injuries all throughout his career. And, you start to look at the corner room. I mean, the corners are like Ferraris, and they can go fast, but they break down. And I'm hoping that they can get 6 or 7 corners that they really trust, because the injury rate at the corner position is super high. And in addition to that, I am less wild on drafting a first round corner just because my completely no statistical analysis attached, which again, for Ken's listeners is probably the exact opposite reason why you're on this podcast. But I fear that they break down and get injured so quickly that I don't like. I know we need a high round corner. We absolutely do. We need corners, but I don't know if I'm going to use that first round pick on a corner. I just think they break down too easy. What are your thoughts there, Ken?
Oh, okay. So in terms of, it's a very high value spot too in the NFL. So that's why a lot of good corners go in the first round. I don't think it's an unreasonable place for the Ravens to take their first round pick, but they have a lot of needs. Ideally, you're in a position where you're not completely agnostic, but you can take a broader set of BPA choices because of where you are in terms of your various position groups. You need to address corner, and you're kind of agnostic to doing so in the first, second, third, or fourth round. It's where you can get the better value on it. You don't need an offensive tackle, which is a huge relief. You don't need a quarterback, which is an even bigger relief. The Ravens go into this with probably the biggest problems being on both sides of the line. Offensive line, if they can't re-sign Linderbaum, the project to rebuild the interior of the offensive line is going to be absolutely ginormous. It's big anyway, even with Linderbaum. Even if you think about it and you say they're going to give the jobs to Emory Jones and Andrew Voorhees to start the year next year, that's no sure thing, and they're going to need significant depth to go with that. I think they would need at least double dip, and they probably need to go to free agency too. So in terms of the draft, DeCosta's pointed out often that cornerbacks are like pitchers, and you really need to have a large stable of them to work from. Ravens had some very bad luck with both 6th-round corners going down. They had a good luck in a sense that Marquise Robinson wasn't poached for the entire year, but he sat down in their practice squad. The Ravens never alerted the rest of the league to his presence and brought him up. But he played awfully well in the preseason. I think he is one of the guys who's kind of on the fringe of the roster this year.
Yeah, agreed. So with that being said, I think if you kind of go with our baseline on offense, you're probably looking at 21 players. Baseline on defense is about 22 players, plus the 3 specialists. That really gives you those two players that you can choose really across the position groups to figure out where you want. And again, I certainly lean towards more edge players than not, because I think that they can really fill in that gap on special teams.
All right, I'm with you on the edge. I'm fine with that, as opposed to say, activating Jay Higgins, say, as a 5th linebacker, or Chandler Martin, or wherever it would be. I'm okay on that. And then I'm fairly agnostic to where you take the additional player among your skill position groups, but I think you can make a case for any one of the 3. There's no changes to the offensive line or quarterback that I would see as reasonable, but I think you go with 4 tight ends, fullbacks. They've certainly done that a lot. They could go with 6 wide receivers. They've done that occasionally, and they could go with 4 running backs, which is something they've also done occasionally. So I think they have at least those 3 choices, and you're not limited to one necessarily, but you're probably going to hold yourself to one on offense and put one on defense, or you may put both on defense, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I would lean towards that, especially with the fact that targets are just hard to come by in the Ravens offense. Yeah. And again, I get the special teams piece, but that the 4th running back, the 4th tight end, the 6th receiver, just seems like you have such little impact on the game, and having someone who could be that extra safety or that extra inside linebacker, right? That could be someone who's on all the special teams units, right? Or most of them. And so that's where I think I would find the most value is an edge player to get you to 5 edge players, and then either an extra inside linebacker, safety, or even corner if you thought it could benefit you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Outstanding. I think we're in alignment there. So we got 2 floaters among this 48 person group that can be used there. Matt, outstanding topic. First of all, really worth the discussion. And while we think very similarly, clearly on this, because I don't think we had a single difference by position group as we went through this, I think it's still valid or important to talk this through kind of with the listeners and hear what your comments are. So please drop a comment somewhere, and I'm going to try and be better about responding to those. I actually have Maureen looking out for them now, so I'll be responding to those on a more regular basis. But Matt, tell folks, if they want to, where can they talk football with you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at 20KidRock.
All right, other folks out there, thanks so much for everything. Use hashtag Film Study Mailbag for questions. I'll direct them appropriately, and we'll talk to you later on Film Study.